Hello, friends, and welcome back. All right, let's talk about the monthly pivot. There's a filter and an alternate profit target. We're going to talk mainly about how the monthly pivot factors into our trades in a way that for everybody who came before this class, I really never taught this as fully as I'm going to teach it this time around. So I'm very excited to bring you this information. So let's kick it off with what is a pivot point, talk about why price is attracted to the pivot point, and the two ways that we use the monthly pivots. All right, the monthly pivot is just a horizontal level of support and resistance. It's going to show up on your chart, and it's just going to be a horizontal line. Look at all these beautiful horizontal lines that I'm drawing here. See this one? That's perfectly horizontal. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, a pivot is a horizontal level of support and resistance that appears on the first day of each month. And it's calculated using last month's price action. It sort of acts like an average of last month's price action. Now, your charting platform is going to automatically calculate the monthly pivot and will automatically also display the monthly pivot. And it will appear as a horizontal purple level. That's the color I'm going to make it because the profit targets are purple, profit, P, purple, profit target. So it's going to be purple on my charts, and I'm going to encourage you to use the same color on your charts also. And you could put the monthly pivot on the SOL Analyzer charts, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And you could also put the monthly pivot on the, whoops, wait, you cannot put the monthly pivot on TradeZero charts. I am working with TradeZero to help them put these into their charts, but for right now, they're not available on the TradeZero charts, and that's fine because we've got them inside of the SOL Analyzer. You can also put the monthly pivot on TradingView charts, and surprise, it's also going to be a purple line. So let's talk a little bit about how we use the monthly pivot and how we put it on the charts in the first place. I'm going to click over here on SOL Analyzer. I'm going to delete the pivots that's there right now, and we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing previously. We're going to click on Indicators, and I'm going to type Pivot. And the only indicator that will show up when you type Pivot is Pivot Points Standard. Now, I encourage you to add this indicator to your favorites, and then click once on Pivot Points Standard, and boom, the pivots are going to show up. All right, so I added them a couple of times by accident. Apologize for that. All right, and they did not show up. So something is amiss at the Circle K. Let's see what's going on. Click on Settings, and let's see what we can do. All right, so if nothing shows up at first, this is a good problem to have because it'll help us work through it. Let's see what we can do to fix that. First, I'm going to click on Inputs. I'm going to type in, I'm going to make sure Traditional is selected from the drop-down menu. I'm going to make sure that Monthly is selected from the drop-down menu. I'm going to type in 30 pivots. We don't need 30 pivots, but I'm going to type that in. Then I'm going to click on Style. And if nothing shows up, I'm going to click on all of these levels here and see if something shows up. Okay, nothing seems to have shown up, and that's fine. We'll fix this. We're going to leave only the pivot point selected, P. We want to uncheck all of the other levels. And then we're going to click on the color of the pivot and choose purple. And then we're going to choose a thick line so that it's easily identifiable. And then we'll click OK. And it doesn't seem to show up. So what I'll do here is I'm going to click on the refresh button here at the top of my browser window. You'll see this circle arrow thing. And we're going to click on that. And we'll refresh the screen and see if it shows up okay. And there it is. So that's all I had to do was click on the refresh. Now it's the wrong color, but I'm going to double click on it. And I'm going to click on the color, click on the purple color and the thicker line, and now it will be there. So I don't know why that happens the way that it does, but this is not unusual, as Tom Jones would say. It's not unusual. Anyway, It's not unusual for the pivot to not show up, and then if you refresh the page, to show up. On TradingView, we can go to Indicators, type in Pivot, and you'll see Pivot Points Standard. I click once there, and boom, this is what I was expecting to show up a moment ago. A bunch of lines all over the screen. Well, this isn't going to work for us. So what we do is we double click on those lines, or we right click on the line and choose Settings. Move over to Inputs. Type Traditional. Pivots time frame, monthly. And we scroll down and uncheck all of these S and R levels. These are support and resistance levels that we do not need. Then we can click on the orange box here, change the color to purple, and change the line width to 2, 3, 4, 5, something real nice and thick so we can see it very clearly. Perfect. There we've got our monthly pivot on the chart. Now I'm going to talk a moment about what this monthly pivot is and how it was calculated. And in order to do that, I need to go to a higher time frame chart to discuss this. So here we are. We're on a 4-hour chart. You can see here it's SGBX, and you can see 4H. That refers to 4 hours. And you can see here the arrows are pointing down to each one of these pivots. So on the first of every month, a new horizontal level appears, and it is the monthly pivot. And it shows up on the very first day of the month. And on the first day of May, the May monthly pivot shows up, and it's at $3.57. It was calculated by taking the price action from the month of April. So this is the beginning of April. This is the end of April. And you can see here was the price action in April. You can see that. That's pretty clear. The May monthly pivot is essentially the average, of April's price action, of the high in the month of April added together with the low from the month of April, added together with the closing price in the month of April, added all together and divided by 3. If you add April's high, low, and close together and divide them by 3, you get $3.57, which is the May monthly pivot point. If you look at the April pivot, it was calculated using the month of March. So if you added together the high price in the month of March, plus the low price in the month of March, plus the closing price in the month of March, which were all very close together, those two, and you added those numbers together and divided them by 3, it would equal this line, $5, $6, something along $5.70, or approximately $6. Oh, actually right here, it's $5.81. So what does all this matter? What's the point of all of this? Well, what you'll notice is price is drawn to and wants to go to and touch its monthly pivot. If it rises up above its monthly pivot, it wants to fall back down to and maybe even below its monthly pivot. You'll see here that in the month of April, price jumped up to the monthly pivot and then crashed. You'll see here that in the month of May, SGBX jumped up above its monthly pivot, and now it is in the process of falling back down to its monthly pivot. This is critically important. AWIN would be the same. This is what, by the way, this is what a long-term chart looks like that we're looking to short. We're looking for a stock that's in a long-term downtrend that has jumped above its monthly pivot and now wants to fall back down to it. Let's take a look at this on a shorter time frame chart. This is AWIN. On a recent day, May 3rd, Friday, May 3rd, the price of AWIN irrationally jumped up above its monthly pivot. That's the worst line ever drawn. Above its monthly pivot. And you'll notice that it fell below that volume weighted average price that we showed and hit its monthly pivot, rose back up above it, dropped right back down to it, and then dropped all the way to the 200 period simple moving average. Price is drawn to, wants to go to its monthly pivot. So for system 1, which we're talking about in these video lessons, we're looking at stocks that have gone up above their monthly pivot, broken back down through the volume weighted average price, and then fall to the monthly pivot and or fall to the 200 period simple moving average. This is a critically important filter. I only want to short stocks in system 1. I only want to short stocks in system 1 when they have gone above their monthly pivot, because it gives me a magnet that price will be drawn back down to. Now you might be wondering, what about for SOL trades? That's different. We'll talk about SOL trades in a different set of lessons. Remember, SOL trades happen less often and have a very, very high probability of success, but because they happen less often, I want to cover those later. So we're not talking about SOL trades. We're just talking about everyday, multiple times of day, system 1 trades. And I'm going to repeat this a couple of times just to make sure that it gets through. There are other kinds of short selling trades that do not require this filter. But this, system 1, requires absolutely, completely, without any exception, it requires price to have gone up above its monthly pivot, and that gives us a profit target for it to fall back to. If we return to our slides, we can see here again that SGBX, well, that's a perfectly good candidate for a trade because it rose up above its monthly pivot, and that means that over the next few days, it can fall back down toward its monthly pivot. Now, it doesn't have to get all the way to the monthly pivot. We can close our trade, as I discussed earlier, halfway the distance, part of the way down, or we can hold it overnight and close it the next morning. We don't have to wait for the monthly pivot to be touched. But in order to take the trade in the first place, for a system 1 trade, we need it to have gone above the monthly pivot so that it will be magnetically drawn back down to it. So we check for the location of the monthly pivot on the 5-minute chart before we take the trade. For system 1, we want the monthly pivot to be located below the current price of the stock. Once again, this is for system 1. We can make exceptions to this rule at other times and places for other trading systems, for other ways of short selling, but this is a nice way to get a lot of good trades with a very magnetic level underneath price. So this is SGBX. It gets a green check mark because, well, price went above the monthly pivot. So it's a approved short selling trade for system 1. This is HSDT. You'll notice here that price jumped up, and it jumped up more than 30%. It jumped up above the volume weighted average price. It dropped back down below the volume weighted average price. But something's wrong. The monthly pivot is up here. So this is not a system 1 trade. It might be another kind of short selling trade. Our friend Jake Hartman, a member here and a very successful short seller, he took this trade, but it's not a system 1. And I will teach you what this is, but I'll teach it to you later on. And so by classifying these trades and by identifying filters and reasons to say yes and reasons to say no, we can divide our strategies into different areas, and we could be very specific in the way that we talk about a trade. So if you say a system 1 trade, the monthly pivot must be located below the current price so that it has a monthly pivot to fall to. And that's very important. So for SGBX, that's an acceptable trade. For HSDC DT, it's not a system 1 trade. It still might be a trade later on in a different strategy, in a different method, but it's not a system 1 trade. And as we begin our trading together, I want you to consider a stock like this. I want you to look at this one, but I want you to be able to identify it and say, oh, that's not a system 1 trade. And that way we become very organized in the way that we think. And when I say system 1, you automatically know what I'm talking about. And when I say it's not a system 1, you'll know one of the reasons why that is. Now, we'll return later to this conversation about the monthly pivots on the longer term charts, because what we want to see, to give you a little bit of a preview, what we want to see on a longer term chart is we want to see a long-term, multi-month downtrend where price has consistently been staying below its monthly pivot as it trends downward. This is very, very important. We want to see a stock that's in a downtrend. We want to see a stock that has multiple times gone up above its monthly pivot and fallen back down over and over and over again. We want to see a garbage company that's just been falling and falling and falling and falling and falling, because that means that even if it rises this one time, this morning, it's likely to fall again. Let me give you an example of what isn't this. Look at this. This is CADL. Now, CADL hasn't been falling and falling and falling and falling. In fact, it's been recently rising. This doesn't look like what we want. This, clearly, in the month of April, price stayed above its monthly pivot for the entire month of April. That's not what we're looking for. And it turns out that a stock that has been able to trend upward and stay above its monthly pivots is not the kind of trade that we're looking for. It's not the kind of stock that we're looking to trade. To give you an example from the big picture, the big world of stock trading, a stock like NVO, the maker of that super, super popular weight loss medication, for months and months and months was just rising and staying above its monthly pivots. That's an upward trend that just seems endless. That's not the kind of stock that we want to short ever, really, until it goes through a long period of time where it has been falling and falling and falling and falling and staying below its monthly pivots. So returning to SGBX, I just want to repeat this again. We're looking for stocks that are on multi-month declines that have consistently stayed below their monthly pivots. And that's going to be something that we're looking at. That's going to be something that every single time I talk to you about a trade, that's going to be something that I checked beforehand. It's going to be something that you're going to want to check beforehand. Now, you could do this in a lot of different ways. If you don't have access to TradingView, you can get a free TradingView.com subscription, and you can put the pivots on your charts for free using the stuff that we just did, putting the pivot indicator. You could actually just sign up for a free version of their account, and you can put the pivots on and you can look at a longer term chart. Or you could look at a 1 hour chart on TradeZero, and you could scroll back in time as far as you could go, possibly, and you could look at some more history on that chart. You could also just go to a website like barchart.com, and you could search for a symbol, SGBX. So I'm going to see if this pulls up. I'm guessing we could just pull up a chart here using, a free version of this. So let's just see what happens. As we're waiting for that to load, because it's being a big old jerk, we could also go to the PowerX Optimizer and click on the megaphone right here. And we could look at the long-term 6-month chart on AWIN or SGBX. And you could just look that over the last 6 months, it's been in a long time downtrend. You could also look at CADL on this, and you could look at a 6-month chart, and that's going up, not down. So you don't have to spend any money to get this information. Now, Google here, Google Finance, doesn't show the monthly pivots, but it does everything else that we wanted it to do perfectly fine. It's showing this long-term, steady downtrend. And this is a long-winded lesson where I've just kind of droned on about this because it's so, so, so important. This is such a big deal. You will find that the best trades that we take are going to be trades where price is above the monthly pivot and wants to fall back to it, and are also trades where the stock has been in a long-term, steady downtrend, thus giving us some confidence that it's going to continue that. And you might be wondering, and you might ask, well, wait a minute, what happens if this is the one time? What happens if it's done falling? And the answer is, that's an old way of thinking. That's a lottery ticket mentality. SGBX loses money, it's probably not going to ever recover from this downtrend. It's probably going to go all the way to zero in most cases. All right, when we come back, we'll be talking about volume.